Okay, so a wasp. A what? We're going to have some fun this morning. We're going to be in chapter 4, and so go ahead and get your Bibles. I'll have slides for most of what I want to do this morning, but we'll be in chapter 4. We'll jump around a little bit. We'll go into chapter 5 and chapter 7, because there are actually 3 wasps in this Song of Songs. And we'll in a second we'll talk about what in the world a wasp is. It's a fun little type of ancient Near East poetry. Before we get there, as I'm the way I do Sunday school lessons is probably not the best way in the world to do it, but I get a topic, and as I teach, I'm learning as I go, rather than spending 16 weeks at home studying and putting together this series and then coming in and teaching it. I am learning it as we're teaching it. And something just popped out at me last week, and to me it was really cool, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it. But what I have found, especially as we transition from the second song that we finished up a couple weeks ago into the third song. Remember, most scholars seem to have some consensus that the Song of Songs is a collection of 6 sections, 6 poems. How they relate together is a matter of huge debate, and I'm not going to try to resolve that this morning, but there do seem to be 6 natural breaks in the song. And the second song we talked about a couple weeks ago, if you'll recall, that's where the girl is at home and her lover comes leaping over the mountains to come and see her. And while he's there, he praises her beauty a little bit, and he says, "Come away with me, my love." And they go off and they do whatever they do in the very cryptic language of the song. And then in the next scene, she's in her room, sleep in her bed, perhaps having a dream, looking for her lover. He's not there. He's gone. She goes out in the city and she starts looking for him. She finds him and brings him home. And that's basically that whole second song. Well, when we get into the third song is much longer and more detailed. But the plot is almost identical to the second song. Now, let me just put up here. As I said, in the second song, it starts off, the lover comes for his beloved. In the second song, he's bounding over the mountains. In the third song, the question is, who is this coming up from the wilderness? And the answer that is offered, it is Solomon in his carriage, Solomon's carriage coming. And so you have this image of, again, the guy coming for the girl. Okay? In both songs, in chapter 2, and then again now in chapter 4, we'll see it here in a second, he invites her to go away with him. They share love until the morning, using almost identical language in the 2 songs. We'll see that in a second. Then in chapter 5, after they're married and they're consummating the marriage in chapter 5, we have another dream sequence. It's almost identical to the first dream sequence. She's on her bed, she's dreaming. This time, her lover is knocking at the door. "Hey, honey, let me in." And she's saying, "Hey, I don't have time for you right now." I have no idea what has happened since the wedding night, but she says, I'm already in bed. I've washed my feet. Do you want me to get up and dirty my feet to come to the door? Well, after that, she finally says, "You know what? I do want him to come in." So she gets up and goes to the door. He's gone. So once again, she goes out into the city to look for him. And then she eventually finds him and brings him home. And so you've got these 2 songs within the song that are nearly identical in their plot line. And I'm just thinking at home, what's going on here? And a couple of ideas came to my mind that, and I have not found any commentary that talks about this, the fact that these 2 songs are nearly identical. I can't be the only person who's ever noticed that. But, but it just dawned on me that they're very similar. And so one thought that might go along with what other people are saying, if you'll notice, last week we were talking about, is this really Solomon coming up? Is this really Solomon's wedding? And there are a lot of scholars out there who have the same problem I do with celebrating Solomon's 700 wives. And they suggest that this is the shepherd comparing his simple love, his simple relationship with his love, with his beloved, against the opulent and over-the-top marriage and wedding of King Solomon. So if you think of it that way, think of the second song as the wedding of our two young lovers. You know, he's coming over the mountains to see her. This isn't a guy coming on a date. In ancient Judaism, and even in current day Judaism, they don't date the way we do. They didn't date the way we do then, and they don't do it now. Even in modern day Judaism, dating is very, very deliberate, very goal-oriented. You're not just hanging out to see if you like people. You're looking for a spouse. And on your very first date, the whole idea is to try to figure out if this person is spouse material. They don't encourage you to go to a movie because you're not going to get to know anybody at a movie. You're just going to be sitting there looking at a screen. And so even today, when young people get together in Judaism, it's very deliberate, very goal-oriented. It's not the idea of just hanging out and having fun together. Well, in the ancient Near East, you didn't even do that. Mom and dad or dad got together with other dad and arranged a marriage maybe while you were 5 or 6 years old. And then later on you became betrothed and you became married. So when we read in the song about the young lover coming over the mountains, I don't picture that now as a guy running to go out on a date with his girlfriend. That's not the way they thought back then. Remember, when a couple were betrothed, the guy would come to get his bride and take her home to his house, and that would be the wedding. I think that's what's happening in chapter 2, verse 8. As he's coming over the mountains, this is the young shepherd boy coming for his bride. And I think what we're seeing here in very simple language in the second song is the marriage of the wedding of the two young lovers. And then in the third song, we are seeing a much more opulent, filled out wedding, perhaps Solomon's to one of his many wives. And there's a comparison going on here. So, I mean, I think that's just interesting. I wanted to throw that out. If you're reading through the song, I'm still going through it every so often, just reading through it from start to finish, just to keep seeing the new things. And if you're doing that, you might want to just. What I'm trying to do is think more anciently. There's so much in this song that as I'm reading it through the lens of my 21st century romantic American culture. And it wasn't written in that culture. So I'm trying to see it from the culture in which it was written. So with that, let's look at wasps. Wasps. There are 3 of them actually in the song. In the song, chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. Chapter 5, verses 10 through 16. And then in chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. Let me give a little bit of introduction, then I want to just read through each one of these. They're not long, and I want us to get some ideas of some of the similarities and differences. First of all, what is a wasp? A wasp is a form of poetry. It's a form of love poetry in which a lover praises the beauty of their beloved. Okay? And it's usually, fairly graphic from head to toe. Start at the head, go down to the toe. As we'll see when we get into Song 7, there they start at the toe and go up to the head. Okay? And there's a reason for that. But usually it's a head to toe praising of the beauty. Now, a wasp is not uniquely Jewish. This is not a Jewish thing. This is an ancient Near East cultural thing. You'll find wasps in Egyptian love poetry, in Syrian love poetry, in Arabic love poetry. It is not uniquely Jewish. Think of it, it's a style of poetry that was common in the ancient Near East. Think of it like we do music today. Okay, we have different genres of music. We have rock music, we have pop music, we have country music. And Christian music can fit into any one of those genres. You can have Christian rock, you can have Christian pop, you can have Christian country, you can have Christian classical. But the genre itself is nothing uniquely Christian about the genres. It's just a cultural thing that we've appropriated. You know, our worship team with our guitar, our piano, our pastor on the electric guitar, we got a bass guitar going on. They could be just as easily singing Bye Bye Miss American Pie up there. Okay? And I don't mean that to sound critical or anything. It's just the genre of music that we have, and again, with the instruments, you can sing Christian pop, Christian rock, secular rock. And that's the way it is with the wasp. You can have a wasp in a thoroughly secular Egyptian love poem or in a very spiritual Hebrew love poem. There's nothing necessarily Hebrew about it. There is some debate as to where you would see it used a lot. Michael Fox, the guy whose book I've been reading and using for this study, says that it's not necessarily limited to a marriage song. It's not necessarily limited to marriage festivals. However, the Net Bible in their commentaries on it says that the typical setting for a wasp would be the wedding night, where the groom is extolling the beauty of his bride. And that's certainly the setting that we see it in here in Song chapter 4. This is very much a wedding night situation. And that's, you don't have, even I can see that, okay? And keep in mind, I'm the guy who cannot see symbolism in anything. I'm extremely literal. You have to hit me with a 2x4. And even I can see in Song chapter 4 that we're talking about a wedding night. So, let me read through these three wasps. I'll just read them in my Bible. I'm using the New Revised Standard Version. And then we'll talk about them. And then I want to go into chapter 4 and look at it in more detail. Okay, chapter 4, we're in the song. We just had this wedding procession. Don't know whose it is, but there is a wedding procession, and now the guy is talking, the boy is talking. How beautiful you are, my love, how very beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats moving down the slopes of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn sheep that have come up from the washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them is bereaved. Your lips are like a crimson thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like the halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built in courses. On it hang 1,000 bucklers, all of them shields of warriors. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle that feed among the lilies. Until the day breathes and the shadows flee, I will hasten to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense. You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Then he goes on and he says, come with me from Lebanon, my bride, come with me from Lebanon. And that's the invitation to his bride to come and consummate the marriage. And but the wasp itself, that specific poetic form, ends at verse 7. So with that, jump over to chapter 5. And in chapter 5, setting the stage, this is again, we have the bride and her dream. Okay? She and her groom are now separated. Okay? And he was knocking at the door. She didn't want to come. She finally came. He was gone. He got tired of waiting. And so now they're separated, and she's gone out to look for him in the city. She doesn't find him quite as quickly as she did in chapter 3 in that dream sequence, but she eventually finds him. And along the way, the daughters of Jerusalem, the companions, the girls that are basically her audience, the people that she's talking to, says in verse 9, chapter 5, verse 9, "What is your beloved more than another beloved, O fairest among women? What is your beloved more than another beloved, that you thus adjure us?" Because she just told him, hey, help me find this guy. And so now the girls, it's her turn to talk. "My beloved is all radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside springs of water, bathed in milk, fitly set. His cheeks are like beds of spices, yielding fragrance. His lips are lilies, distilling liquid myrrh." We'll come back to that verse later on. "His arms are rounded gold set with jewels. His body is ivory work, encrusted with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns set upon bases of gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His speech is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem." And so that is the girl's wasp in praise of the boy. And then, toward the end of chapter 6, there seems to be a dance sequence where the girl is dancing for the guy. And so now in the beginning of chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, the boy now is extolling her beauty again, but because she's in a dance sequence, he's starting with her feet and moving up. Starting verse 1. "How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden! Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master's hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat, encircled with lilies. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are pools in Heshbon, by the gate of Beth Rabban. Your nose is like a tower of Lebanon overlooking Damascus. Your head crowns you like Carmel, and your flowing locks are like purple on purple. A king is held captive in the tresses. How fair and pleasant you are, O loved one, delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I say, I will climb the palm tree and lay hold of its branches. O may your breasts be like clusters in the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples." And he goes on. And so there we have 3 wasps. Now, how does all this stuff make you feel, besides kind of weird and reading all this stuff in church? I mean, think of our own relationships. How many of us talk to our spouses like this?
All the time, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I was just thinking, I adore this, and I don't know. It just calls for something so deep, and I just love it.
Absolutely. I mean, and Susan, for those of you online, she's saying she adores this.
And there's a part of me that's dismayed, because I'm like, dang, she hasn't had children yet.
Okay, yeah, so,
You can skip that part on the audio.
okay. I was going to make it even funnier, that the mother of 5 is dismayed that this girl hasn't had children yet. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. Yeah, Allison.
I was just going to comment, like early, and it makes me think of
Yeah. Allison's sharing just some of the history with her and Julie, how they wrote letters back and forth, and shared their love for each other, not necessarily in Wasp type language, but certainly, and she made a good point in that she says it harkens back to the beginning of a relationship. I mean, there is a reality in relationships, and yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. There's a reality in relationships where we start off, the hormones are flowing, the chemicals are flowing, the endorphins, whatever, the oxytocin, whatever those hormones are, they flow very strongly at the beginning of a relationship. There's a newness, there's discovery. There's something fun about learning about somebody for the first time. And there's that discovery going on, and you feel it very strongly. And then as you go on, especially when you go from a dating or engagement to marriage, I mean, when you stop and think about it, when you're dating, you're home, hang on, Ruth, I'll get to you. But when you're dating, you go out to be together, and then you go home to separate. The moment you get married, that it's flipped. You go home to be together, and you go out to separate. Now, what happens, and we may not realize what happens, is that, when we're home, this is where we are who we are. We're not wearing our best clothes. We're not, our hair looks awful, okay? Those of you who have hair, okay? We burp. We do all kinds of stuff at home that we don't do out. So when we are in a dating relationship, we're putting on our best clothes, our best selves, our best face, not to be deceitful. No, it's just, we just want to look our best. And then after the date, we go home and we look like who we really are. Well, after we get married, now we're home together looking like we really are, and it's a totally different dynamic. And I think that all sort of comes into play, and we don't realize the effect it has on us until 10 or 12 years down the road, when suddenly, we're not only are we not saying Wasp love poems to each other, we're not even being kind to each other. We're talking about paying bills. We're talking about this, that, and the other thing, and our language can get kind of harsh. Go ahead, Ruth. Okay.
But it was like, we're in the wooing phase, and then once we get married, there's still the honeymoon phase. And I think about the movie Fireproof and how he says, you need to continue to do that, and you need to get high school, college degree, graduate degree, continue to do that. The reality is often it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You maybe need to sit down and watch Fireproof once a week or whatever. Kicker, on a break the year of.
Yeah.
And some people are better than others at always being kind or whatever, or things come in our lives and crises and everything, but like you said, we need to harken back to that time of before, whether we had one, no children, or lots of children, or as we start to live and lose hair and all the rest of the stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for those of you online, Ruth is talking about the need to woo. She brought up the Fireproof movie, a great movie, if you haven't seen it, and the Love Dare book that goes along with it. We need to be deliberate in our relationships. We can't just wait for it to happen. And that's what happens. We just wait for love to happen, and it doesn't happen without our deliberation. Yes, Susan.
It's important to be brave in our relationship with the Lord and remember that He is looking on. This is where that Christ gaze can help our current gaze. He's my husband, praise. But if I'm brave and consider, I one time, and you don't have to believe it, and that's okay, because I know it happened to me, but I had a really strong Jesus and an angelic encounter, and I felt so ugly in this space. And an angel looked at me and said, "You don't see it. The closer you get
Hold that thought. We'll get there in a second. Yeah, I mean, there is so much in this, and we're going to see this more clearly here in just a couple slides. There is so much about this whole song that isn't just about a man and a woman, but this is about God and us. And the more we see ourselves the way God sees us, maybe the more open and brave we can be, I love that word brave, about expressing our love to each other, receiving it within ourselves, having the courage to receive a compliment. Because it's hard to receive a compliment. It can be very hard. Nobody knows your flaws better than you do. And I'm saying that about myself. I know every one of my flaws, okay? And so, somebody might give me a compliment about something, and I would say, hey, you don't know what's really going on inside, okay? And sometimes we need to have that realization that God loves us. In Brennan Manning's book, Abba's Child, he tells us to define yourself radically as one beloved by God. That's my definition. That is who I am, one beloved by God. And if I can hold on to that, that solves a lot of issues. Yeah, Allison?
I was just gonna, what you were saying specifically about like not being able to see the compliment because you like know secretly like, oh, but if you only knew this about me, this flaw that I have. Something that I tell clients all the time that I try and remind them of, and also I try to remind myself of, just because like you have a flaw doesn't negate the compliment. It's not an all or nothing thing. You can appreciate like areas where you are improving, where you are growing, but also appreciate, yeah, I need to, like, this is something about me that's not perfect, that's okay. That doesn't negate your value in all other areas.
Right, yeah. Having flaws doesn't negate the compliment. I love that, Allison. That makes it very well. Yeah, Margaret?
And back when you were I'm thinking about the covenant thing. And that is after, you begin to understand that pursuing this is a fresh thing, everything like that. But that's where people are missing out if they decide, I'm not happy with this relationship. Because the commitment makes you push through and you start seeing things in that person that you would never see
Mm-hmm.
if you've been given up.
Right. I mean, marriage is a commitment, and commitment means choosing to work through it, choosing to hang in there, and it can be extremely difficult, but it's not. I mean, Hallmark movies always end too early. Okay, they always end when the couple either gets engaged or married, and then that's the end of it. That's the fun part. But life goes on, and it gets messy, and that's where the commitment comes in. When we talked about the different Greek words for love, the erotic love is the sensuous love, the phileo love is the emotional love, but the agape love is the love of the will. It's the love that we choose to have. Not because it feels good, not because there's something particularly lovable that I see right now, but I choose to love because you're a person that God loves and deserves to be loved. Here's what I want to do now. I hope this is going to be fun. It's going to be kind of interesting. What I want to do is look at this first Wasf in Song chapter 4, and I want to compare it in two different Bible translations. The two I'm going to use are the Web Bible, the World English Bible. This is the Bible I use for most of my slides all the time. It's in the public domain. It is a 21st century update of the 1901 American Standard Version. Fairly plain vanilla translation, fairly accurate, fairly literal. Then I'm going to compare that with the Passion Translation. And the reason I'm using this one, this has been kind of eye-opening to me. As I read the Wasps, as I read this guy talking about gazelles and everything, And I think, okay, the song is supposed to be an allegory of God's love for Israel or Jesus' love for the church. I have a really hard time imagining Jesus talking to me like this. Okay? It's creepy. Okay? And yet, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in the sense that, yeah, this is creepy, but Jesus does love his church tenderly. I want to somehow be able to allow that love to come in all of its emotional manifestations, to allow that to come in, allow myself to see the tenderness of Jesus' love for his church, of which I'm a part, and to find a way to grasp that. And I'm thinking that for those out there who might, get the willies with the sensuous, erotic language, the Passion Translation gives us a way of seeing this tenderness without the eroticism. And I've got slides, we'll just go down verse by verse. I want to see how it compares. The Passion Translation is kind of a misnomer. This is not a translation. This is more of an interpretation. This is a way of looking at the song as a love song between Christ and the church. Last week we were talking about the wedding procession taking place in chapter 3. Is this Solomon's wedding? Is this the shepherd's wedding? Whose wedding is this? Brian Simmons doesn't care. Brian Simmons is the translator for the Passion Translation. He doesn't care. This whole song to Brian Simmons, at least from what I can gather, reading it and reading his introductory materials to it, this whole song is about Jesus and the church, and only Jesus and the church. This isn't Solomon. Solomon's name is not mentioned in the song other than in the very first verse. This is the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, and Brian Simmons is a very firm advocate for Solomon being the author of this song. But he never talks about Solomon as being the bridegroom. For him, I think the bridegroom is Jesus and only Jesus. And so what he has done is presented the song in very spiritual language as if it's Jesus and the church interacting. And so with that, let me just show you what I mean. Okay. Some of these slides are going to be a little bit harder to read because I had to shrink the font down. This is not one of them. So if this is hard to read, this is the best you're going to get. Okay, on the left. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is a flock of goats that descend from Mount Gilead. I shared the other day that Carol and I were going for a walk, and I said, Carol, your hair looks like a flock of goats. She wasn't impressed. I was just testing it out. It may have been my tone of voice. What some commentators are hint at here is that when you think of a flock of goats descending from the mountain, you're looking at it from a distance. You're looking at it from a distance, and you just see this line of black goats coming down the mountain. And so it might resemble hair from a distance, okay? Sort of think of it like a Bob Ross painting, happy little goats coming down the mountain. And so, you get that sort of picture. Brian Simmons in the Passion Translation looks at this image and tries to find a spiritual element to it. And he presents it spiritually, not necessarily as a translation saying that this is what the original author meant, but rather this is a way that we can look at it and maybe it can speak to us. Listen, my dearest darling, you are so beautiful. You are beauty itself to me. Your eyes glisten with love, like gentle doves behind your veil. What devotion I see each time I gaze upon you. You are like a sacrifice ready to be offered. And he's seeing the sacrifice there. If her hair's like a flock of goats, well, the Jews would sacrifice goats. And so he is seeing in the goats a sacrificial element. And so he's seeing in his bride, once again, in Brian's eyes, This is Jesus talking to the church. And he's seeing devotion in us. He is seeing a sacrifice ready to be offered in the form of goats. So here you're getting a sense of what Brian is trying to do here. Take the literal imagery and try to get a spiritual reading of it. Yeah, Allison.
Well, and I just wanted to comment on that idea of the sacrifice. Sacrifices were supposed to be perfect. And so I almost wonder if the idea of like being a sacrifice more perfect in my eyes.
Yeah, Allison's talking about the sacrifice had to be perfect in Judaism. And so there's an element here where Jesus is looking at his church as a perfect sacrifice. And we're going to come back to that thought because we're going to see this over and over again. And I want to touch on that thought later on. Verse 2. Your teeth are like a newly shorn flock, which have come up from the washing, where every one of them has twins. None is bereaved among them. I love that line where everyone has twins. You know, every one of your tooth has a twin. Okay? You know, number 1 and number 16, you know, number 17 and number 32. My dentist is really impressed that I know the numbers of my teeth. And I told him all you have to do is know how to count. If you know where to start and how to count, you can figure out the numbers of your teeth. And so, 8 and 9 right in front. I mean, every tooth has a twin. And what he is saying to her is, you got all your teeth. That may have been a big deal back then. Although I will say this, when they discovered the remains of Mount Vesuvius in Pompeii, they found all these skeletons and all the skulls. They all had perfect teeth. Everybody back then had perfect teeth. And they speculate that the reason was they had absolutely no sugar in their diet. No candy, no sugar, nothing fun. And so, maybe that wasn't as unusual as we think of it. Yeah, I don't know. So, but in the Passion Translation, now her teeth are going to become a source of verbal expression. When I look at you, I see how you have taken my fruit and tasted my word. Okay, so now we're talking about something verbal going on. Your life has become clean and pure, like a lamb washed and newly shorn. You now show grace and balance with truth on display. So now, a newly shorn flock is a clean and pure flock, showing grace. Now, these are internal qualities, and Brian is seeing these internal qualities coming out and being expressed in the external flock of teeth. Remind me, if we get to the end and I forget about it and I run out of time, I've got a wonderful slide from a Shakespearean sonnet I've got to share with you. So I don't want to miss that, even if I run out of time. Okay, sorry with this one. This just has too much to get with a larger font. Okay, your lips are like scarlet thread. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples are like a piece of a pomegranate behind your veil. I don't even know if I would know a pomegranate if it hit me in the face. So I don't know what it would look like. Okay. Yeah. Her temples. Yeah, that was weird. It does say temples here. Yeah. If it's not here, somewhere else it talks about halves of a pomegranate. Okay, your lips, the Passion Translation. Your lips are as lovely as Rahab's scarlet ribbon. Again, here he's taking liberties. Rahab, the name Rahab doesn't appear in the Hebrew anywhere. Your lips are as lovely as Rahab's scarlet ribbon, speaking mercy, speaking grace. So now her lips are not just something to be kissed. Now there's something to speak. And for Brian, they're speaking mercy, they're speaking grace. The words of your mouth are as refreshing as an oasis. What pleasure you bring to me. I see your blushing cheeks opened like the halves of a pomegranate. That's where I saw it. Okay. Okay. Showing through your veil of tender meekness. Okay? Yeah. There's one thing, yeah, there's a lot of repetition in this song. And a lot of these verses we'll see in later and earlier, and that's how scholars try to figure out what they mean. They see them in the different contexts, even within the song. But here, once again, in the web translation, we get a picture of ruby scarlet red lips, again, thinking more about kissing than talking. In the Passion Translation, this is talking now. Her lips are for talking, and they're going to speak mercy. They're going to speak grace. Okay? Again, he's not getting this from the actual Hebrew words that are used, but this is language, quite frankly, that as a guy trying to hear the tenderness of Jesus' love for me, this can resonate with me. And so this can speak to me more so than the erotic language if I'm looking at this song as an expression of Christ's love for his church. Now think about this. Go back to what Allison was saying. There's a perfection in the sacrificial lamb. Look at what he's saying about his church here. Your church is speaking mercy. Your church is speaking grace. Really? Have you been on Facebook? Been on social media and see how the church often talks, or how we in the church often talk to each other? Part of our biggest problem, one of the reasons why Christianity is declining, is because we, the church, don't speak with mercy. We don't speak with grace. I mean, we love to find our enemies and pound on them. And we do it even within the body. Okay? You know, I can find fault with all the other churches around. And they can find fault with us. And it's just, what he's saying here is pretty amazing when you stop and think about it. What Jesus is seeing in his church, I'm wondering how real it is. The true church, that's a good thought. Okay, now we got a strong neck. Your neck is like David's tower. How many of you ladies want to hear that? Built for an armory, whereon 1,000 shields hang. All the shields of a mighty man. Now, with that, the 1,000 shields, I'm picturing a very ornate necklace. I don't know if any of you watch Dick Van Dyke reruns. There's that one episode where he brings home Empress Carlotta's necklace. And it's just this big, horrible, gaudy thing. And Laura acts like she loves it, and of course she doesn't. It's just horrible. That's what I'm picturing there. It's just a big necklace with shields and stuff. Back then it may have been thought of as attractive. But yeah, you got a strong neck. And then with the Passion Translation, Brian turns this inward again. He turns everything inward. When I look at you, I see your inner strength, so stately and strong. You are as secure as David's fortress. Your virtues and grace cause 1,000 famous soldiers to surrender to your beauty. And so, again, we're seeing the web translation giving us a fairly accurate literal translation of what the Hebrew words are. Brian Simmons is trying to find an inner spiritual message to come through there.
He's definitely adding his own interpretation into the scripture. That is for certain. And it's not that it's wrong. It's just that you can't. That's that individual perspective on it. How
Yeah.
taking this in, and it's not that it's not that it's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. This is interpretation more than translation. And I honestly wish he had done this more as a commentary rather than as a translation, because, you pick up the Passion Translation of the Bible, you think you're getting the Word of God. You're getting the interpretation of the Word of God through Brian Simmons. Again, there's value here. There's value here in the sense that it can help me at least, and maybe I don't think I'm the only one. It can help me at least to see the tenderness of of Christ's love. I mean, when we think about our attitudes about God, I can't remember who it was who said it, but basically what we think when we think about God is the most important thing we'll ever think about. And when we think about God, it is so easy to not see him as the loving father that he is, or the loving bridegroom that he is. It is so much easier. My default image of God is that I see him as the judge. I see him as the demanding judge. Yeah, go ahead.
I think for everybody, if you've had a true experience with Jesus, if you've had that time when you were just so on fire that you just love Jesus, that's all you can think about. You're studying, you're pouring into Scripture, and you look forward to every next moment you had in prayer or coming with God. You could kind of see I don't know. It's like being in love with your bride.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that. And maybe that's kind of what's being brought out.
Yeah. Matt points out, for those of you online, that, even in our early relationship with Christ, Revelation talks about our first love. We get that on fire, I'm in love with Jesus, emotional feelings, and we've had those. But even in our relationship with God and Jesus, that can fade away, so much so that's what Revelation says. I think it was the Church of Ephesus. They had lost their first love. Okay, so let's get to the tricky part. The verse for which I wore my red shirt. Okay, your breasts are like gazelles. Your two breasts are like two fawns that are twins of a roe, which feed among the lilies. Until the day is cool and the shadows flee away, I will go to the mountain of myrrh, to the hill of frankincense. Okay, let me talk about this first, and then we'll go over the passion side. That last phrase there in verse 6, until the day is, saw that earlier in chapter 2 and verse 17, where the bride was saying to the groom, it's the exact same language, until the day is cool and the shadows flee away. And there she said, be like a gazelle on the mountains of Bether. And the mountains of Bether translate as the mountains of separation. And the Net Bible suggests that the mountains of separation are yet another allusion to upper female anatomy, and that the bride was inviting her lover to spend the night making love to her. The Net Bible has that suggestion, and they get it from this verse, from these two verses. In these two verses, the bridegroom is definitely praising her breasts, and he's saying what he's going to do. The mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense are referring to her upper anatomy. Okay, if you look at that literally, sensuously, erotically, Brian Simmons has scrubbed out all of the sensuality and the eroticism of this song. You will not see the word breasts appear anywhere in the Passion Translation of the Song of Songs. He sees them as representative of something else. And in this situation, it is your pure faith and love rest over your heart as you nurture those who are yet infants. He's taken that phrase, feed among the lilies, and he's taken that to say you nurture those who are yet infants. And then he says this, in verse 6 in the Passion Translation, this is now the girl talking. Brian Simmons has the girl speaking in verse 6, not the guy. I've made up my mind until the darkness disappears and the dawn has fully come. In spite of shadows and fears, I will go to the mountaintop with you, the mountain of suffering love and the hill of burning incense. Yes, I will be your bride. So with the Passion Translation, once again, he doesn't want to talk about breasts, and I get that. I'm not having fun up here right now either. But at the same time, he's turning it into your pure faith and love, and he actually gets that from, I believe, Ephesians, talking about the whole armor of God, or somewhere in Paul's. Okay, thank you. Galatians and Philippians. Thank you, Susan. It's in Paul's writings where the breastplate at one point in time is expressed in terms of faith and love. So you've got that imagery in Paul's writings, and he brings that back into his translation here. So the woman's breasts are her faith and love. And then down, he talks about the mountain of suffering love. Earlier in the song, we read about the woman having a sachet of myrrh that she wore, which hung down between her breasts. And the whole idea there is that ladies at this time would wear this sachet of myrrh throughout the night as they slept, and it would essentially perfume their entire body for the rest of the day. Brian Simmons points out that myrrh is a burial spice. It is a burial spice. It's an embalming spice. And so he makes a fairly strongly worded comment that myrrh always refers to suffering love. And so anytime you see